What's good? We're back in this thing. Today we're gonna be going over this pixel depth map tutorial. I really just be tossing names out in a certain order to make titles. If you guys haven't already noticed, I just thought it was funny recently because I've just been uploading so many videos. I feel like I run out of names for effects. So that's what we're going with today, pixel depth mapping tutorial. If you're new here, what's good? My name's Brian. I make music video tutorials here on YouTube. Sometimes do some vlog stuff. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, go ahead and subscribe. It's free. We're on the road for 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And you guys have been going crazy with the likes and comments. So I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much. Also, if you're interested in leveling up your music video editing game or saving time while editing, you can go to my website, briandalmada.com. Check out my packs and presets. It's a great way to add different looks to your music videos while also saving time. And also, it's the best way to support the channel and keep me uploading 3 times a week. So it's greatly appreciated. I'll have a link to the website down below, as well as a tutorial playlist of all the effects that I've done using my packs and presets. Yeah, that's pretty much it though. Let's get into the video and break down this effect. So now that we're in After Effects, I'm gonna be showing you the 2 effects that I came up with and kind of just showing you how this effect works. It's actually native to After Effects, so you don't need any plugins. I'm going to be using 2 plugins to kind of sauce it up, but the particle effect itself is actually native to After Effects, so you're not gonna need anything to get this pixelated look. So here's the first effect. It bounces on Gunna and then it bounces on the background. I think it's a really cool effect. It's pretty basic, but you know, I was kind of just experimenting around with what you could do with the effect. And then here's another one where this is actually just one clip and it spins. It starts off spun 180 degrees and then it spins around to its actual facing. And then here is what I kind of went from this and I was like, oh, you could probably transition between 2 clips. So that's what I went ahead and did. And I think this looks pretty clean. You can see that there's the checkered background. You can really put whatever you want back here. When I was editing it, I actually had the checkered background on and I thought it looked pretty cool. So I just went into Photoshop and took a screenshot of the checkered background itself and then just put it behind there. Just thought I'd let you know, but you guys can really put whatever. You can put other clips, solid colors, really whatever. So first off, I'm just gonna be showing you the main effect that you're gonna need to make this look, and then kind of showing what does what in the effect, because it is a little bit more complex of an effect. It has a lot of different options and things that maybe you need to learn how to use before, you know, we go into the actual effect and the transition. So the effect you're going to be looking for is called Card Dance. It's built into After Effects, like I've already said. It's going to start off, and if you drag it on, it's going to do nothing. So to get it to actually do something, first you're going to need to go to Gradient Layer 1 and select the clip that you're on, and that's not going to do anything right away. But if you go ahead and change the X, Y, or Z position, for us we'll change the Z, and then you're going to want to change your source to something. You can have it affect the intensity, red, green, or blue, or alpha. If you do alpha, it's going to do the whole thing. And then if you select red, it's going to move, I believe this is how it works, it moves all the red clips closer to the screen if you drag it whatever, and then the opposite of red, so on the opposite side would be green, it's pushing all that back. I believe that's how it works. I could be mistaken, but just go ahead and play around with all the sources and stuff. They all look pretty cool. And then, you know, you got this blocky look. It's cool. If you want to get it more pixelated, like how I did, you can bump up the rows and columns. For example, if you bring it to 100 and 100, you can see it already is a lot more blocky. And it allows you to go all the way up to 1,000 actually. But when you're animating it and changing all of the transitions and keyframes and stuff, I'd recommend doing it at 100 by 100 because it is pretty intensive on your computer. So I always just tweak everything with 100 by 100, and then if I want it to look like this towards the end, I go ahead and make it 1,000 by 1,000 at the end. So with that being said, I'm just going back to 100 by 100 here. So if you're not familiar with the positions X, Y, and Z, I'll kind of briefly break those down. X is the horizontal plane, so left to right. Y is vertical, up and down, and then Z is actually making it 3D. So that's why I went ahead and chose this one. I think it looks the coolest, is it's going close or far. So it's kind of, it's bringing depth to your image. So these cubes are technically closer and some of them are farther away. You'll be able to see a little bit better when I go ahead and actually play with the camera settings. So for right now, I'm just going to bring it down a little bit more. And then the same thing with rotations. They're all just going to affect the X, Y, and Z plane as far as, and as well as scale. Just remember you have to change your source and then change the multiplier. You can get some really, really crazy looks. I'm basically just going to be touching on those 2 transitions that I was showing, but there's actually so much that you can do with this effect itself. So I would recommend just getting familiar with what everything's doing. Just have a downloaded clip or something and just play around with all these positions and scales and rotations, and you'll probably get something really, really cool looking. You can also play with the lighting and the camera position. You can see here, if I change the Y rotation, it's going to stay aligned properly vertical, but it's going to be twisting horizontal. So it's almost like it's a piece of paper just spinning this way. And now you can see the depth. Some of them are further back, some of them are closer. And if you change the X, you can see it has it rotate up and down like this. And the Z rotation is going to have it twist that way. There's a bunch of different things you can animate doing that. You can play with the lighting. I'll be going over that briefly as well. And the material is cool as well because you can make it look shiny and kind of make it easier to tell that it's 3D looking. But first off, let's go ahead and do that first effect that I did. So the first thing you're going to need to do is rotoscope out your subject. I always say do a good job rotoscoping the first frame because it does make it easier and it just looks better. Then once you've gone through and rotoscoped every frame, go ahead and click freeze. It's going to lock in your rotoscope, basically separating the background from the subject as well as making it so you can't change the rotoscope lines anymore. After that, go ahead and close out that layer, and now you can see we have Gunna rotoscoped out. And then I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that layer and then go to roto brush and delete that from the bottom layer. So the top layer is just Gunna and the bottom layer is the normal clip itself. Then go ahead into your effects and presets and drag card dance onto the rotoscoped out layer or the layer with just Gunna. And then make sure to do gradient layer and change it to your clip, as well as I'm gonna go to Z position. Obviously you can do whatever position you want. I'm gonna have it affect the reds. And then I'm gonna bring the rows and columns to 100 so we can kind of see what we're doing right now. And then we're gonna tweak it to 1000 later. And then you can see when you bring the multiplier out, you can see what that affects. So maybe we bring it out a lot. I'm actually gonna make it like 250 or something right now just because it's a smaller rotoscope, just so we can kind of imagine what it's gonna look like a little bit better. And then go to keyframe the multiplier and then I'm gonna go 10 frames forward and then bring that multiplier down to 0 here. And then I'm gonna click U on my keyboard to see the keyframes, highlight them and click F9 or easy ease them. You can do that by highlighting and right clicking, going to keyframe assistant and then easy ease. And we can see the particles go back into Gunna, and that's looking pretty cool already. I personally like the rows and columns to be at 1000. I think it just looks the best because it's like smaller pixels. There's plenty of different ways you can use this effect, so I'm interested to see how you guys come up with it. But you can see now the blocks are a lot smaller this way. Some things I add on to it just to make it look a little bit better is drop shadow. And drop shadow is really cool. If you change the opacity to 100, the distance is 0, and then the softness just a little bit, so you can kind of see what's going on here. Maybe like 12. So it has a little bit of depth. I think it just makes it separate from the background a little bit more. It's not really something that's necessary, but I just found it looks a little bit better in my eyes. And then I'm gonna add deep glow. You can add any kind of glow you have, really, sapphire glow, VR glow that's built into After Effects. I'm gonna go ahead and use deep glow and then go ahead and change the radius down a lot, and then as well as the exposure down a lot. And then I'm gonna keyframe the exposure of the deep glow and go to the last frame and bring it down to 0. Because if you don't do that, then it's going to be glowing on your subject, which maybe you want, but it's gonna be glowing on your subject all throughout the transition. Also gonna easy ease them. And then you can see we still have that drop shadow. So what I went ahead and did to fix that, it just went like 2 frames forward, keyframe the opacity, and then went to that last frame in the transition, so the 10th frame, and then brought the opacity down to 0. So now when you go ahead and render that out, you see you have this mesh kind of effect going back into Gunna, and you can see in my example that I had it like bounce. Once it gets onto him, I have the background bounce out. It's pretty simple. You do basically the exact same thing we just did, but on the background layer. So to do that, I'm gonna go ahead and go to that 10th frame, or maybe actually the 9th frame, so it kind of starts right when it's ending. And then go ahead and go to card dance, make sure to change that gradient layer, the Z position. I'm gonna go ahead and change that to red. And then I'm gonna do that 100 by 100 for right now, just so we can see. And then go ahead and keyframe the multiplier to 0 at first, because we want it to start here. So once it goes into him, it's gonna be at 0. And I'm also gonna keyframe the offset and then go 10 frames forward, keyframe the multiplier to 1. And then I'm just gonna drag the offset to 1 as well. That way it fills up all the edges here. And then go another 10 frames and keyframe the multiplier and offset both to 0. Go ahead and click U on your keyboard. I'm gonna highlight all those and click Easy Ease. And then I'm gonna go ahead and add that drop shadow on, bring it to 100, bring the distance down to 0. I'm gonna do the drop shadow, the softness roughly the same that I did with the rotoscope. And I'm actually going to go ahead and duplicate our background layer right now. And go ahead and delete card dance and drop shadow. So we have the normal clip playing in the background, just so we can see the drop shadow taking place. And then I'm going to go ahead and add deep glow as well. And then roughly use the same settings there. And then I'm gonna keyframe the exposure in the middle of the transition. So right at the peak to 3.5 on the deep glow, or basically the brightness or whatever on your glow, depending on which one you're using. And then go to the beginning and go to the end and both make those 0. And we don't really need to keyframe the drop shadow at all because the drop shadow is not gonna really be showing once it goes back to normal. And then you can see here is our transition. I want to go ahead and actually increase the Z position, the multiplier, a little bit more. And then if you just keep that offset number the same, it will fill it up completely. And then I'm also going to crank the rows and columns up to 1,000 each. That way it has a lot more pixelated look. And then I'm going to go ahead and render this out. It's probably going to take a little while because it is pretty intensive. And then once your computer's finally done rendering that, you can see this is what we came up with. I think it's really cool looking. Obviously, you don't have to do this exact sequence or whatever. I wanted to show you kind of concepts you can do with this to kind of interact with your clip. And I think this is a really cool example of that. So then the second thing I'm going to be going over is this transition that we did here between this Uzi clip and Gunna. I think it's a really clean transition. And it's kind of eye-catching as well. And you can see it captures the depth of the clip. You can see here. Yeah, it's not that hard to do, so let's go over that. So first off, you're just gonna want 2 separate clips here. We got this one with the flowers, and then this room with the sky. What I went ahead and did first is just pre-compose these layers, and then name this like merge or something, just to kind of show that it's merging the clips. And then I move all the attributes always, and then adjust the composition so the span is the same length. And now you can see they're just together in the same comp. And you don't really have to do anything from here. I think to make the transition a little smoother, I'd recommend overlaying these clips like, I don't know, maybe like that many frames. I don't know, like 4 or 5 frames. And then go ahead and press T on your keyboard to bring up opacity. Keyframe opacity on the first clip, the clip that's overlaying, from 100 to 0. And then T from 0 to 100. Basically just making a crossfade. That way the clips fade in and out together. And that's just gonna make the transition between the pixels smoother later on. You'll see what I'm talking about. And I would probably recommend doing an even amount of frames. I just did 5, so I just made it 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That way we can split the transition right at the 3rd frame. So it's like 3 on each side. And then go back into that big comp. And I'm gonna go ahead and do the time sign on your keyboard to make a marker. That way we just know where the transition is in the middle. And I'm also just gonna trim it down for what we missed out on. And then what you want is card dance, and drag that onto your clip. Again, the basic things, the gradient layer, go ahead and bring that to merge 1. And then I'm gonna use the Z position again. I'm gonna have it affect the reds. Do that 100 by 100 for right now, just so we can see. We'll go ahead and tweak with the settings of the Z position later. We're actually gonna want to go ahead and use the camera position right now. So to start this transition off, I would recommend doing like a 30 frame transition. I think anything faster than that is going to look a little too fast. I'm gonna go 15 frames to the left, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right there. And I'm gonna start the rotation of the Y off already at 180. Because we want to have it flip and do a complete 180. So I'm going to have the first clip started off inverted. So it's actually just flipped. And if you don't want your clip flipped to actually be playing at the beginning, what you can go ahead and do to work around that is pre-flip it. And then once you go into the comp here, it's going to be flipped the right way. And then I'm going to keyframe the Y rotation. I'm going to keyframe the multiplier because I want the multiplier to start off at 0. That way it's the normal clip, and it's dark right now, and I'll explain why in a second. But we're just gonna go ahead and keyframe the motion real quick. go to the middle keyframe and then go 15 frames to the right. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And then keyframe the rotation down to 0. So now you can see you have your footage doing a flip, and that's cool. Obviously, it's not what we want yet. We're gonna go ahead and tweak some things to make this look a lot better. So first off, to fix the lighting issue, we want to go to lighting down here and then go to light depth. And we're gonna wanna bring that to anything negative. So you can see once it's at 0, as soon as you bring it a little negative, it's gonna be lit on the right side. So basically, to best describe this, the reason is why it's not lit properly until it gets to negative. It's basically saying that there is a light source here and there's a wall. And anything on this side is the positive, and then as soon as you get to the negative, the light source comes to this side. So obviously, a wall would not be lit when the light source is here. This side of the wall wouldn't be lit. But as soon as it comes negative and the light source comes on this side, then this side would be lit, but this side wouldn't be. So hopefully that makes sense for you. I tried to describe that as best as possible. I'm gonna go ahead and keyframe the light depth -1 here. And then I'm going to go ahead and go to the last frame in this transition over here and keyframe it to 1. And if you use the same values, it should click over right at the right time. It should actually be at 0 here. So it will light both sides properly. So if you go ahead and do -5, make sure you put it at 5 if it's 15 frames on each side. That's probably the most confusing part of this transition. I just wanted to make it clear so that way it's properly lit the whole time. And then also make sure yours on distant source. That way it just illuminates the whole clip. If you're on point source, it might just illuminate the middle because as the light gets closer, it's basically like a small light. But yeah, there's plenty of things you can do with the lighting. And if you play around with it, you'd be kind of surprised at how much you can actually do with it. And now to actually get that pixelated look, we're gonna go ahead and start off by keyframing the multiplier at the beginning. And I'm gonna go to that 15th frame here and then bring that multiplier up. And then go to the last frame and bring that multiplier to 0 again. And now we can see we kind of have that transition. Just play with the multiplier in the middle to make it a little bit smoother, because the more the multiplier is gonna be, the wider it's gonna be spread out. So I kind of left it at 1.5, it looked good for me. So you can see a little bit of the depth, but it doesn't spread out across the whole clip. And then I'm also going to go ahead and bring the rows and columns back up to 1000, because we're pretty much done with this effect. I'm gonna highlight all of the keyframes, everything that we keyframed here, and then ease it just to make it a little smoother of a transition. And then I'm also going to go ahead and drag that screenshot of the checkered background just to fill the background with something. If you're working and you just kind of want to see what you're working with, you can actually go ahead and tweak that checkered background on and off in After Effects, but it won't render out like that. So I just thought it would be cool to actually render it out like that. I went ahead and put that screenshot in. Then I'm also going to add drop shadow. That way we don't have to render it a bunch of times because it takes a while to render it each time. So I just want to go ahead and add all the effects on right now. I'm gonna go ahead and add the drop shadow, bring the opacity up to 100, distance down to 0, and then the softness right around what we had before, like 12. So it has a little bit of depth. I'm also going to go ahead and add that deep glow on. And then I'm gonna keyframe the exposure. That way it's not illuminated the whole time. And then lastly, the ultimate sauce. This is also gonna make your computer rendering crazy long, but the RSMB, Real Smart Motion Blur. If you guys don't already know, this is the absolute juice when it comes to editing. I pretty much just add it on everything and it makes your clips look better. So basically just blending the motion a little bit smoother. And then there's one last thing I'm gonna do before I actually turn back on that Real Smart Motion Blur, is I'm gonna go ahead and go to the materials here and play with the material diffuse reflection, the specular reflection, and the highlight sharpness. It's basically just going to give it a more of a 3D feel. You can go ahead and do this on the other effect as well. It's gonna do the same thing pretty much. We obviously don't wanna bring it too bright, but I'm gonna go ahead and go to the middle, just like we were, keyframe all of them, go to the beginning, reset them, then go to the end and also reset. And that way the materials kind of peak right at the beginning or right at the middle. So it just makes it a little bit more apparent that it's 3D. And I'm also gonna highlight all those keyframes and ease them. That's just a little bit going above and beyond, but I think it does really add a little bit of extra sauce to it. And then go ahead and render that out. And then once your computer finally renders out the clip, this is what it looks like. I think I'd probably relax a little bit on the lighting. I think for the material, I made it a little too bright here, but I'm not going to go ahead and re-render it for the tutorial. These are all things that you're going to have to tweak yourself and kind of figure out what works best for your clip. Obviously, this is a really, really sick transition. I think this one came out better than the one that I showed you in an example. So it's always just about tweaking the settings and doing different things. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got for you guys in this one. If you made it all the way to the end, I really do appreciate you. Thank you very much. If you haven't already, like, comment, and subscribe, go ahead and do that. Support the channel. Check out my packs and presets. Turn on the post notification bell. I'm going to be seeing you guys shortly. Peace.